Hi, everybody. Hope your new year has gotten off to a good start. Glad to see 2020 gone and starting a new year. Hope everybody's healthy, staying healthy. My husband and I had the COVID right after Christmas, so New Year's was a bust, but we're not partiers anyway, so it was no big deal. But we got over it, and got that out of the way, so we're good. So I hope you guys are all staying healthy. Today I'm just gonna bring up a few topics to update you on, remind you about. Nothing, real scheduled here, but any other things that you guys have, don't hesitate to, unmute yourselves and ask questions as we go along. Again, we'll go until noon. There's also a chat box if you don't have microphone or you don't want to, don't want to verbally talk. You can pull up your chat box and type in your question. I'll try to monitor that here as we go along. So anyway, so let's get started. Excuse me. A couple of things I wanted to just update everybody on. Number one was the COVID-19 Emergency Paid Sick Leave and the Emergency Family Leave Act. Back in, I think, April, Congress passed the CARES Act that required you to pay sick leave and family leave for those people affected by COVID. Those have expired. As of December 31st, those are gone. So you no longer are required to pay emergency paid sick leave for someone who has been told to quarantine or isolate because of COVID-19. And you're no longer required to pay family medical leave for people that need to take off because they don't have childcare or school's out or whatever. So those have expired. Okay, so you're not required to do that anymore. I know we had a couple of trainings on those last year. Now, that is not to say that if your board wishes to extend that on your own and make that available, the board can do that as a benefit, right? But you're not required to pay it per the federal government. So, and even if it was started prior to December, let's say they got sick and had to go in quarantine on the 27th of December, that pay ended on the 31st. Even though, the law said you get 2 weeks worth up to December 31st. So it's up to you. It's up to your board, whether they want to extend that, but you're not required to. Okay. And that's kind of bad timing. I know Missouri's kind of just been really been hit the last couple of months. We didn't get too much of that early on. So that's kind of unfortunate that the law expired. So that is gone. Okay. Anybody got any questions about that? Questions about taking leave? Okay. So from this point on, it's really up to your board as to whether they want to extend that that benefit. Okay. The other thing, we've sent out a couple of e-newsletter alerts. And I think DNR sent out a thing on the vaccine. So, the COVID vaccine is here. And there's a phased rollout. Critical infrastructure, including water and wastewater, they're in the 1B Tier 3 group, which the governor has not opened yet. So, right now, if you're just a wastewater or water operator or work for critical infrastructure and you don't fall into any of the other categories, you're not eligible to get your vaccine yet. And you guys probably already heard, there's a shortage of the vaccine. I heard Dr. Williams on the radio this morning, the bow tie guy from Department of Health and Senior Services, if you know, Randall Williams, said The shortages they don't know how much they're going to get each week. They've got 2 million people to vaccinate, and they get about 8,000 doses a week. So it's going to be a while. But we'll keep you informed. The other tiers are open. So, right now, if you're a healthcare worker, or if you're over 65, or if you have an underlying medical condition, those tiers are open and you can get your vaccine if you can find it, so that's the issue now is, can you find it? Okay. But generally speaking, water and wastewater industry, you're in group 1B tier 3. So listen for that when that opens up. If you want to go, there's a good website that Department of Health and Senior Services has, that you can go and keep track of who's eligible and who's not, and what the different tiers are and who falls in those tiers. And that website is covidvaccine.mo.gov. So that's covidvaccine.mo.gov. And that is the website about all of the vaccination technicalities. Okay. So that's some good information to keep track. Again, we will be sending out updates so you can watch. If you don't subscribe to our e-newsletter, you might want to do that. Go to our website and look for subscribe to the e-newsletter, and make sure you get that. We send about one out a week. So make sure you get that. Okay. Anybody got any questions about the COVID-19 stuff? What you're required to do? If you did pay somebody on the emergency paid sick leave or family medical leave, I hope you kept records. Not that you've got to report it specifically to anybody, but they warned you beginning that make sure you keep track of what pay was paid under those conditions versus regular pay or regular time off, because they may ask for it at some point. Okay. So make sure you've kept those records. Okay. The other thing I wanted to just remind everybody, it's end of year. January is always a busy month for everybody, especially those office people, because you're doing your end of year reports, those W-2s, W-3s, getting new W-4s written up if you need to. All those payroll reports, sales tax reports, if you charge sales tax that you got to get in. Most of them, I think, you've got to have them mailed in by the 31st of January. So that's coming up on us. Don't forget them. If your fiscal year ended, and this probably a lot of you water districts, maybe if your fiscal year ended on December 31st, don't forget you have to have a financial report to the state auditor by June 30th. If you don't, it's a $500 a day fine. Okay. So make sure you get your annual financial report turned in to the state auditor before. You've got 6 months after the end of your fiscal year to get that in. Okay. So if you have an annual audit done, you can just turn the audit in. That'll satisfy. If you don't have an audit done, the state auditor has forms that you can download and fill in and submit electronically that has the financial data in it that they're looking for. So, but do not ignore that, because there's some towns, I know a little town up by us racked up $145,000 in fines because the clerk never sent the report in. Okay. So they do take it seriously. So get those in. Also, I know fourth class cities, water districts, you don't have to do this. I don't think villages have to do this, but fourth class cities, you've got to publish your 6-month financial statement in the local paper. You got to do that every 6 months. Make sure you get that done. Because technically you can't spend money if you don't publish those reports. So you water districts, that does not apply to you. Okay. So, but you fourth class cities, I know it does. Okay, so now that's kind of the things I wanted to remind you about. So now I kind of want to just open it up to issues that you're having. I'm going to bring a couple up that I've seen, that I've gotten calls on, or hi Denise, that that I've gotten calls on or that have popped up on our Facebook page. By the way, for those of you that don't know, we have an office professional Facebook page, MRWA Office Professionals. If you're not a member of that, you might want to go on there and ask to join. It's good information. I post all of these types of meetings and notices on it, and other people post questions or situations and ask for input. So go to Facebook, look for MRWA Office Professionals Group, and ask to join, and we'll get you right in, and you can see that. So some of the things have come up on that over the last couple of months, and just kind of wanted to bring it up for discussion. So feel free to join in here. But one thing, and I don't know why, certain times of the year this pops up a lot, is landlord renter. Boy, some of you that have been around the meetings and stuff, this is kind of like we've discussed this, but I bet I've gotten probably 4 or 5 calls in the last month and a half about landlord renter. So okay, so Kendra says, I talked to Liz about this issue. Unfortunately, Bunker does not have a cop at this time. I contacted our local sheriff department about someone cutting the lock off our meter after shut off. It was about $190 to replace the parts off the meter. The law enforcement agency told me there was nothing they can do anything about it. What can we do to pursue this? Okay, so let's, since I talked about landlord renter first, Kendra, we're going to talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll talk about tampering and some of the things you can do, because that was my next topic, is I'm going to talk about is tampering, shutting off customers. What do you do with the customer that cuts the lock and that type of thing? So be thinking about that, you guys. We want your feedback on some of this. So landlord renter. State law does not allow a landlord to shut off utilities in order to evict an occupant. Okay, you cannot do that. So the question was, if the account is only in the landlord's name, can the landlord request it to be shut off? Legally, probably no, unless it's, now if it's in arrears, you can shut it off for non-payment. Okay. So the situation of it, kind of what was brought up was that, okay, the landlord hasn't paid the bill, so it's in arrears, but we know there's renters living in the property. Can we shut it off? You can shut it off for non-payment. However, what an attorney told me, because this was brought up at a conference, one of our meetings, is that you probably should let the renter know that the account is in arrears and it's going to be shut off on such and such a date if payment isn't made. And if they say, well, the landlord's supposed to pay the bill, that's fine. I'm just letting you know it hasn't been paid, so we're going to shut it off for non-payment. Then to me, the issue is between the renter and the landlord, okay? Because the landlord basically breached their contract if their rental agreement says they'll pay the utilities, okay? Doesn't mean you can't get some pushback. You can, but now if the landlord just calls you and says, I need you to shut the water off because they haven't paid me rent, you can't do that. Okay, that's constructive eviction, and you can't do that. Okay, so what the attorney that I talked to says recommended is that in that first situation I talked about, give the renter the opportunity to bring the account current, and if they don't, then shut them off for non-payment. Okay, because the landlord is using utilities as an eviction tool and circumventing the eviction law. Okay, and you don't, it's just not legal. Okay, that's always a touchy situation, but you want to give the renter probably the opportunity to bring it up. Okay, so that was that situation. Of course, the other situation with landlord renter is holding the landlord responsible for renters that skip out. And yes, you can do that. I highly recommend that you do that. There is a state law that allows you to do that. you can hold a landlord responsible for 90 days of service. And if they don't pay it, you don't turn the water back on. Okay. You cannot make so the renter flees, leaves you with a big bill. New renter comes in and you say, well, there's $500, whatever, $200 bill on this account, and you have to pay it before we'll let you sign up for account. You cannot make them pay a bill that they did not incur. Okay. So
who can't you pay? You can't make the owner pay that?
you can make the owner pay that. You can't make the new renter pay that, right? Okay. So you can't do that, but you can make the landlord pay it. And the landlord's not going to rent the property if he doesn't have water turned on, right? So the landlord needs to pay it. But you need to, what's recommended, there is a state statute, it's 250.140, okay, that lays this all out. And most attorneys will tell you you need to take that statute and incorporate it into an ordinance if you're a city, or a resolution if you're a water district, and pull it into your policies and rules and regulations, okay? So the question is, what if you do not have the renter's name or contact information? Well, if they're living in the house, you can go to the house and deliver the message in person if you need to, put a hanger on the door or something. I mean, if they're still in the house, you can do that. You have the address of the service, so you can send it, send that a letter to that address, to occupant at the address, and whatever. I wouldn't think that would be a big problem. Okay. If they're there, where they are, and you can probably leave something at the house. But you just can't shut off utilities because the landlord wants to use that as a way of evicting the renter. Okay. So be careful with that. Denise is thinking. Yes, Denise.
Yeah, we currently have this going on. My owner has not paid the water bill. We're now 3 months in, and we actually did contact the renter. Well, Eric tried to. He went up to the door and they wouldn't come to the door. So she did finally call me. She said she was willing to pay the water bill. The owner doesn't want the water turned on. As part of that statute where the owner is responsible for the water,
well,
how does that work?
Well, you can, if it's 3 months, you can only hold them responsible for 3 months of service, right? So okay. If they haven't paid, and it's not that you have to make an effort to contact the renter. I mean, if you drop something at the door or in their mailbox or whatever, you've made that attempt, right? Okay. If they refuse to answer the door, then that's their problem. They know something's wrong, right? Yes. And you just need to document what attempts you made, right? And then if she doesn't want the water turned on, she probably shouldn't pay the bill. You just go shut it off for non-payment.
She has stopped paying the water bill.
Okay, then I would shut it off.
Then if the renter wants to pay the water bill.
Well, I mean, that's what the attorney told me, is that you need to give the renter the opportunity to pay the bill and not get it shut off, because she's using that as an eviction tool, and that's not legal. Okay. So, and you probably want to establish this in your board policies, Denise, and also that if the landlord refuses to pay, and the renter will pay, service will be maintained. Okay. That's what I would do, so that everybody knows that's a policy. But you can't use utilities to evict a renter. Okay.
Nobody's evicting at this point due to COVID. I feel both directions on this. I mean, we had a long discussion at the board meeting last night over this situation.
But isn't there, and I haven't followed this real close because it really doesn't, but isn't there a new round of rental assistance for landlords who have not evicted?
Well, they're not getting put through our court system to have them evicted in my county.
Right. See, and I'm not real sure what the COVID thing is. It probably is different if it's a private versus a Section 8 house, you know.
Right.
But again, the landowner has some recourses here that they can do on their own, right? Don't make the landlord's problem your problem.
Okay.
That's and I know that sounds cold-hearted, but you know, and we want to help everybody, but you can't help everybody and stay in business, right? So there was never a moratorium on utility shutoffs. You could always shut off water for non-payment. COVID did not affect that. Okay. So and this is something that goes on. So you I would make it a policy that if the landlord refuses to pay and they're the account holder, you give the renter the opportunity, very short opportunity, but if they don't pay up, then the water goes off. And until somebody pays the bill, it's not going to get turned back on. Okay. But if she pays the bill and now she's current, she says, don't turn it back on, and there's a renter in the house, that could be, you could be in trouble then, because that is using the utilities to evict it. So once it's paid, you should restore service.
So let's say she goes all out and says, I forfeit this meter. Do I pull the meter?
That's kind of the same thing, in my opinion. Again, I'm practicing law without a license here, Denise. So, but again, she's using utilities as an eviction tool.
Okay.
And I would be very careful.
Okay. But if she's responsible for the water, if I come back to that statute, I'm just in knots over this, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but.
Right. Well, I mean, basically, you know, it's not your responsibility to make sure the landlord gets the rent.
Okay.
It is not your responsibility. All right. Don't make it your responsibility. Okay? That is the landlord's problem. You're to make sure that the bill gets paid. Don't care who pays it. Your responsibility is to make sure that bill gets paid. Okay? So if the landlord doesn't pay it, because the rental agreement is that the landlord pays the utilities, then like I said, this attorney said, give the renter the opportunity. If they pay it, fine. If they don't, the water goes off. And it doesn't come back on until somebody pays the bill. Okay. So if they don't pay the bill, they're not going to have water. They're going to eventually move out. You're still not going to turn the water on until that landlord makes you whole. Okay. Even if they rent it out to a new renter, you don't turn it back on until.
Is it worth putting a lien on it? I don't know what kind of money you're talking about, but is it worth putting a lien on it? I know he's not probably going to sell it, but if he gets a notice saying lien's going to be put on this property, maybe that would prompt a landlord to pay.
That's your option, is to put a lien on the property, but they're using it to get rid of the renter.
They are, and I know
that's
that.
What they're doing. That's not your problem, okay? And don't make it your problem. That's the landlord's problem. So, and like I said, yeah, there's been some moratoriums on evictions, and I don't know who those apply to. I haven't looked at that. I haven't followed that real closely. But my understanding is, especially in this last round, there's some rent relief supposed to be there. So they need to look at their other options. That's not your problem. Don't make it your problem. So question is, how does it work when it is an apartment building? The water's in the owner's name. An apartment building where you have a bunch of people, then yeah, you don't go to the renters. You probably should let them know the water's going to be shut off because your landlord didn't pay the bill. I would let them know. That will put some pressure on the landlord, but you can shut them off. Okay. So the previous situation, we were talking more about, single households. So, it's a problem. I agree, and it's a stressful problem. Just don't make that landlord's problem your problem. Okay. And that sounds cold-hearted, but they need to manage their business. You don't need to subsidize their profit. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel. Okay. So that always gets a lot of discussion going, the landlord renter thing, and it's tough. But just take a close look at your policies. So Ruth said, we notified renters in an apartment complex and the landlord got a lot of angry calls. He paid the bill. I'm going to say 90% of the time that's what'll happen. But you can contact the residents and say, look, on Tuesday, your water's going to be shut off because your landlord didn't pay the bill. Don't have to tell them how much the bill is or anything like that, but you can warn the residents that this is going to happen. Let them take care of their landlord, right? Same thing on the single family. I let the renter know your water's going to get shut off because your landlord hasn't paid the bill. So you need to be talking to your landlord, or you can pay the bill and we'll maintain the service. So, but with an apartment complex, that's a little bit different. Okay. Is that considered giving out personal information? No, name, address, and water bill are public information under Sunshine Law. So you can tell them that the water, you don't have to tell them how much it is. You can just say the water bill hasn't been paid. Shut off date is this date. It will be shut off for lack of payment. And that's really all they need to know. But that is not giving out personal information. No. Okay. All right. Anybody else got a landlord renter question or words of advice or how you handle it? The problem is when it's just in the renter's name and then the board won't hold I've run across several systems where the board refuses to make the landlord responsible. Sorry, you just get what you get then. If your board won't hold them responsible, there's not a whole lot you can do because you can't make the next renter responsible for the previous owed. So, you're not helping yourself there. Okay.
So I think you'd mentioned this. So you don't see that the renter needs to have their own deposit then if they come in and pay the bill, or
a lot of places do. A lot of places require the renter to have the user agreement and a deposit, and the landlord to have a user agreement and a deposit on it all times. So if the landlord skips, you've got the renter deposit and you'll use the landlord's deposit. Okay. And then the landlord has to come in and up their deposit if it gets used. So a lot of places require both. Okay. To have
in this
agreement.
situation, I didn't know that there was a renter there until this started happening.
Yeah.
So
that's a problem too. But, but a lot of places make the renter and the landlord have a user's agreement in place with deposits from both. And they charge the renter like double what a homeowner would pay on deposit. So if your homeowners pay a $75 deposit, if you're a renter, your deposit's $150. Pretty typical. Okay.
we've gone to $200 deposits for both at this point. So
yeah.
for any new accounts. Now so any current accounts, we haven't gone back and required any owner deposits.
Right. But if it ever gets used, then you make them pay the new deposit up, right? If they ever get stuck is what you do. Yeah.
Right.
So
it's helped us out a lot by changing that to $200.
Okay.
I'm a person that extends the credit to people.
Oh, you got a soft
I'm that person.
You got a soft heart. Okay.
Well, it's made it very difficult for me at this point.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's the problem is people will take advantage. As long as you give them rope, they'll take it as far as they can. So a lot of them will, not everybody, but a lot of them will. So So question, I had a probation officer contact me asking if a certain resident had utilities in their name. I told them yes and sent a copy of the deposit agreement, but the electric company would not give the information out. Was I in the wrong? Okay, so what the court has ruled is that the water bill is public information. Name, address, and water bill is public information. Did not say anything about the user agreement or deposit agreement. So depending on what information you collect on that user agreement, you know, if you have social security numbers on there or driver's license numbers or something as part of that deposit agreement, then you cannot release that. I don't know, you know, I would hesitate. I would tell him, I mean, you could tell him, but I don't know that I'd give him a copy of the deposit. You can give him a copy of the water bill and say, here's the water bill for that resident. And you can see who it's addressed to and who pays the bill. But that's probably as far as I'd go unless I got pushed by somebody in the legal realm. Okay. Okay. So does anybody have a policy template for this landlord tenant situation for review? Does anybody have are you looking for a user's agreement for landlord tenant, Sharon? Wait a minute. There you go. Let me unmute you. There you go. No, you're still muted. Can you unmute, Sharon? There we go.
Hello, more the
There.
policy, what
Policy.
they have in their policy and procedures
Okay.
from that, because it is a kind of an ongoing situation, and one we do, like Denise said, we have a higher landlord deposit requirement, but in some of our situations, especially where we do billing for the sewer system, that can get eaten up pretty fast. And so typically a landlord we have won't pay until, you know, we're locking it, we're carrying it until he wants to rent it, and then he'll come in and pay it. So it's
Mhm.
an ongoing problem.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's just the nature of the beast, I think. So yeah, if anybody has in your rules and regulations or your policies how you handle landlord renter, email that to me and then I'll get it to Sharon, or we may post some of those in our download section. I know, I don't know if there's anybody on here from Thomas Hill. Thomas Hill Water District has all of their policies online. You can go to the Thomas Hill Public Water Supply District website and see. Now they require the landlord to have it in their name. They don't deal with the renter at all. You know, push comes to shove, I don't know that they would get away with all of that, but nobody's challenged them on it. So that's one place you can go, is the Thomas Hill Public Water Supply District. You can probably Google that and get to their website and see their policies. So, so on the user's agreement says, could she give them a copy of a blank agreement? You can, but I think the point was that the officer wanted to know if that particular person had service and wanted to see the agreement for that person. So a blank agreement wasn't going to get them the information they needed. Okay. So, so yeah, if you've got a set of rules and regulations where you address the landlord renter, especially, if you wouldn't mind, send me that and I will make it available. If you don't mind sharing and make it available, see what everybody else is doing. This whole landlord renter is a sticky wicket, but basically you cannot shut utilities off as a method of eviction. That is illegal. So be careful with what you do. Just make sure you got yourself covered. Okay. Any other comments on this? I'll look and see if I missed any. Okay, so let's go back to Kendra had a question about they shut somebody off. They had somebody tampering, they cut the lock off the meter. It cost about $190 to repair and replace the parts. And the county sheriff told them there was nothing they could do about it. What's been some of your all's, do you have problems with meter tampering? What's been your response? Law enforcement, anybody wanna comment on that? No? Kathy, I know you've had some issues with that.
Yes, we have one that they tampered with it, and they hooked their service line up to the meter directly, bypassing the meter set and bending it out of the way. So we did file a police report on that. Of course, we didn't press charges, that kind of thing, but he was going to be responsible for the repair and the replacement of that meter set, since now it is compromised by being bent and stuff. So everything was going fine. We're following our policy on what is to be done with that. And then he is to pay the cost of that repair. And everything was fine with that part as far as the policy part. But this person is kind of difficult and not very nice. But anyways, he obtained an attorney out of St. Louis and said that they weren't going to pay it. They don't have to pay it and all this other kind of stuff. So we kind of went back and forth on this a little bit. They said they had a video. I asked to see the, I asked our attorney, Doug, if I'd like to see the video, because I know nothing. They weren't there when we were there with the police or with the sheriff. And he was out there video, and all they were doing was the repair, and nobody spoke to him really. So I was wanting to see what the video was, and he never produced the video. So I talked with Doug again, and I said, this has been going on for 6 months now, 6-7 months. And I said, I don't understand what the problem is. If our policy states that this is our course of action, if somebody tampers with the meter, why it's in question as to why he thinks he shouldn't have to pay it, and why an attorney thinks that he shouldn't have to pay it. So this last month, since we hadn't heard from his attorney in over 60 days, I went ahead and started billing him and prorating it out over a 12-month period, what was owed to us. And so now I have not seen anything from the attorney. But Doug thought he did receive an email, so I'm waiting to see what that email had to say. But here again, I fall back on the fact that if we have it in policy, why can we not enforce our policy then?
Yeah, good question. You can have a policy, you can enforce the policy, but that doesn't mean they can't challenge your policy. Okay, now whether they win or not is another question, right? Tampering with a meter, tampering with a water system is a felony. It's a federal felony, right? Now, so I get from around the state different responses from your law enforcement. Kendra said what their sheriff told them was that unless you have a eyewitness that shows that they tampered with it and stole the water, broke the lock off, turned the water on, then you can't do anything about it. And that's not true. Somebody else, Michelle said, this Osage County Sheriff's Office said you could press charges for theft of water. So if they cut the lock, turn the water on, they've stolen the water, and they can say, well, we didn't do it, but they benefited from the crime. Doesn't matter who did it. Okay. Your users agreement ought to say something in there about they're responsible to ensure their meters and whatever, and anything that's wrong, they need to report. They know they got shut off. They knew it got locked. When they got water again, they did it, they did, but they benefited from that. So, again, documentation is important. It's important to document when you shut them off, if there was that the user's agreement, if you don't give them extra note, a notice that they're going to be shut off, which you don't have to, but the user's agreement needs to be very clear that you're going to shut service off for non-payment and what those conditions are. And then, if it was tampered, they benefited from the crime. So yes, you can prosecute them. So you need to have a long talk with your county sheriff and your prosecuting attorney if this becomes a problem. You know, but you know, word gets around, so don't do that. It said, so Andrew County Sheriff's Office will arrest them and they turn our complaint over to prosecuting attorney's office, and then they work with us, and if they pay us, we drop it. If they don't, they will pursue the charges. So that's Andrew County. So, you know, so Osage County, Andrew County, you know, if your sheriff is having some issues, you might refer them to these counties and talk to them. But yeah, it's a, and then Ruth said they put it on the bill. If they have a repair bill, it's part of the bill, and if they don't pay the bill, they're shut off. Okay, so you can now. The other thing, I'm not real mechanical, so some of you guys that have actually shut off or changed meters out, I talked to one operator, and evidently when you buy a new meter, it's got plugs on each end, right? Like caps or something. And what this this operator would do is if it was a customer that was prone to cut the lock or turn their water back on, he would pull the meter, put the caps on the ends, and then put the meter back in, and you couldn't see the caps. So when they did turn it on, no water would flow. So then they'd call and say, I can't get any water. And I said, well, that's because you're shut off. If you pay your bill, we'll go make the water flow again. Just an idea, you guys. It involves a little extra work than just turning it off and putting the lock on. But if you have customers who are notorious, you might figure out a way to put a plug in those ends and make sure the water won't flow. So
Can you not provide service to that customer for doing that? Can you stop
yes,
service?
you do not. They don't have a right to service.
Okay.
No, if they don't pay, they don't have a right to service. If they tamper and violate your rules and regulations, they don't have a right to service. So yes, you can stop service. You bet. And some have had customers that have had such a big leak that it put a drain on the system and they refuse to fix it. You can shut them off because your rules and regulations ought to say if a customer uses water to the extent that it harms the system or affects the system operations, you can shut them off until the situation is remedied, right? So I've known systems where customers had such a big leak that it would drop pressure or some other issue, and they shut them off until they get the leak fixed. So yes, you do have that. So Ruth said they've used that method of plugging each side of the meter when they shut it off, and then they can't, because you can't see it, they don't know what's wrong, right? So just an idea. You might see if you can find plugs that fit that. But they saved the plugs that came on new meters and put them in there. That's what they did. So yeah. So so Kendra, going back to your first thing, I would have I would put the charge on the bill. Okay. And you're a subs user, so if you need to know how to do that, call me. I can tell you how to put that charge on the bill. And then if they don't pay the bill, you shut them off. But you need to have a talk with your law enforcement agency that you don't have to have an eyewitness. They benefited from the crime. It's their meter, it's their service. So therefore, they're responsible. And why would anybody else mess with their service? So Brian Nichols says, if you don't have the plug, just cut some thin plastic with scissors the same size as the meter gasket and put it in there. So one thing to consider, talk about that with your operators, is you just plug the meter so they can't, even if they turn it on or cut the lock. Okay. So unfortunately they moved, but I don't have to let them turn services back on, correct? So if it was a rental, then no, you hold the landlord responsible by state law. Again, your board has to back you on that. So if it was a rental, you can make the landlord responsible. You don't turn it on until the landlord pays the bill, but your council needs to back you on that. You can invoke the state statute, okay? But you can only charge them for 30 days of actual service, okay? So if you let it go 6 months, you can't charge them for the whole 6 months. You can only charge them for 30 days of service, okay? What if they want to turn it on in someone else's name? It doesn't matter. The landlord is responsible. So you hold the landlord responsible. He can't move another renter in. It was in his name when it went delinquent, and he owns the property. You hold the landlord responsible.
But if he sells the property, the new owner can't be held responsible for
true.
that bill.
That's true. If he sells the property, you can't make the new owner. So if you have a landlord like that refuses to pay, put a lien on the property. Put a lien on it. If it sells, you've got the lien. They can't get a clean title unless the lien is satisfied. That doesn't work 100% of the time, but it makes it much more difficult. But just turning it on in another person's name doesn't get past that, okay? What would get past it if it's sold and you didn't catch it? So another thing you can do, and it's in smaller towns, is, you know, you might want to have a talk with the realtors in the area and say, look, you need to call us before property sells to make sure there's not a lien on the property, that there's not a utility bill that's owed, because it's going to be a problem. Okay. And a lot of realtors will work with you on that. I know up where I am, a lot of realtors will call the utilities and say, is there a bill owed on this? Now, if they foreclose or file bankruptcy and you haven't filed a lien on the property, there's nothing you can do. You cannot go after them, okay? Once they've taken those steps. So, yeah. Okay.
I would just recommend that you be careful with telling information about the bill, as that became a situation in my district.
Yeah.
It caused us to change our whole policies about things. So
Yes. Yeah, be careful. The only thing that's public is name, address, and water bill, okay? So, yeah, you need to be careful. And Denise kind of got caught in a situation, I think that was, I don't know, it caused a big stir. I don't know that it was anything illegal, but Denise got caught in a kind of a situation, but it wasn't pleasant. But yeah, name, address, and water bill. But you need to know who your landlords are that own the rental properties, you know, make a point of knowing that. And you do have to keep track of them. Yeah. So, okay. Anybody else got any situations or recommendations on how to better handle landlord renter situations? They're just difficult. So does anyone have a sample lien they can share? I do have one. I think it's even on our downloads section. I'll double check. If you go to our website and go to downloads, and probably in the drinking water folder, there will be a sample lien. What I would recommend is that you don't need the attorney to write up the lien every time, but you might want to go to your attorney, have him draw you up a template. Draw me up a lien that I can fill in the blanks on, right? The name of the property owner, the legal description, it's all public information in the courthouse. Spend the money to have your attorney draw that up for you, and then you can use it from that point on. You don't need them every time, okay? And the thing about filing the lien is more than the bill. They owe the bill, they own the filing fees, because it costs you, like somebody said, a lien costs $28 to file. Depending on how many pages it is, it's so much per page. You might want to find that out from your county recorder, what the fees are, but you add that to the bill. You add, if they've paid it and you release the lien, you have to file another release with the county. You add that to the bill. You add any attorney costs you've had, penalties and late fees up to the point of filing the lien. I mean, this $50 bill is now $150, right? So you can put the lien on for all the costs associated with placing that lien on the property, okay? And you want to do that. Who do you file the lien with at the county? You fill out the lien, you have it signed and notarized, and you file it at the county recorder's office. You take it to county recorder and say, I want to record this. And that's all you have to do, okay? And then it is recorded in the property. And so if that property ever changes hands and they try to get a clean title, it'll show up. That lien will show up, okay? Now, I don't know, I think, well, and it says, it's always told that the liens were so expensive to file. They're not expensive to file. Now, if you have your attorney file every single one, then yes, they get expensive because the attorney is going to charge you for all of that. But like I said, have your attorney do the template for you, and then you can file the liens from that point on. There is a process. You have to send a, like Diane said, you have to send a letter out to the person filing the lien, saying there's going to be a lien filed on your property, and this is what you owe. Again, go have your attorney drop the template and write down the steps, okay, and make sure you follow those steps. It's pretty black and white, those of you that do it, right? It's pretty black and white, the process, but spend that money up front with your attorney to get that all set up. And then after that, you can file the lien, okay? And it's not that expensive. It's basically what your time is plus the filing fee, the recording fee from the county recorder's office, okay? But have your attorney set you up, okay? And they should be willing to do that. Now, if you've got an attorney that says, oh, no, you need to let me do that all the time, you probably need to get a second opinion on that, okay? Yeah, Kathy said the most complicated thing about the lien is the margins on the document. That's why you have, yes, the county recorders, and this is statewide, this is uniform. Any document you file with the recorder's office has to have specific margins, top, bottom, and side margins, and they're very specific. If you don't know what those are, call your county recorder. They can tell you. And then you don't want to infringe on those margins on that paper. But your attorney should be able to do that. But just have them set you up kind of like a lien packet, right? Here's the template, here's the steps, here's the sample letter that you have to send, here's the actual lien form, here's the steps 1, 2, 3, 4 that you have to go through to file a lien, okay? So I would recommend you do that. Once you do that, it is not expensive to file a lien on the property, okay? Okay. Just takes a little work up front, and then you can do that, okay? Anybody got anything else? This was a good discussion. Yeah. Okay. Little change of subject. Couple things I just want to remind you about. If you haven't seen it, I am doing another board and council training, virtual board and council training next month. It is on our website under training. You can see there, you can register. It's $125 per person. But if you have anybody that needs board and council training, whether it's a board member, a staff member, or whatever, you can sign up for that. It'll be Zoom. It's from 6:30 to 8:30 every night. Denise, you're laughing. Do you have some board members that need to do that?
No, Diane.
Oh.
Cynthia funny.
Oh, okay. Inside joke, I guess. Okay.
Do you want me to tell everybody what I said?
No, that's okay. You don't have to.
I'm fine.
I don't want to be the teacher that makes you read your note out in front of the whole class, right? But anyway, that was just posted. We are going to limit it to 25 people. So if you have somebody that wants the board and council training, you probably need to sign them up sooner rather than later. And so go to our website to see that. There is a two-step process on this. Since it's a Zoom meeting, you register and pay on our website, and then you're given a link to Zoom, and you have to go and register on Zoom. You don't have to pay again, but you got to put your name and add name and that kind of information on Zoom. So there's a two-step process to registering for the board and council training. Okay, so take a look at that. Again, February 16th, 17th, and 18th are the dates for that, from 6:30 to 8:30 each evening. Okay, and that'll satisfy you water district people that get your board members that 6-hour training so they can get their attendance fees. Okay. Another thing we're working on that I'm kind of excited about is we're working with some people to do some specific training, online training, virtual training through Zoom. Probably going to start them next month, but a series of classes. Some of them are designed specifically for like managers and clerks and board members. Some of them are going to be operator driven, the nuts and bolts things. But we're talking with them. We're going to meet again Friday and maybe get a schedule out. And then some of the topics we're talking about for the clerks and the office professionals and managers. And this is an engineering firm we're talking with about doing this, but we're going to talk about things like, so you're looking at electronic meters, and Sharon, this is a day late for you, but like talking about if you want to go to electronic meters, here's some things to consider. Here's the options. Here's the differences, rather than a vendor telling you. We're going to talk about prevailing wage. When is it applicable? When is it not? We're going to talk about those pesky contract documents. If you have a project, what does all that mean? What's important? What do you need to know? Like bonding and performance bonds and all that kind of stuff. We're going to, I don't know, we've got a whole list of things. So kind of be watching for those too. That's going to be in addition to this. So, but we're trying to do some more comprehensive training, probably last an hour or two at the most. So anyway, kind of be watching for that. That'll be on, again, we'll put that on our website. I'll put it on Facebook too when we get some of those. So, okay. So someone said, did you talk about all those legislative emails? Are you talking about the ones that asking you about how it'll affect you, Denise? Okay. I didn't talk about that, but if you want to talk about that real quick. So at some point you signed up with the Legislative Research Office. Okay. You may not have known that you did that, but you probably did that at some point. And what they do is anytime a piece of legislation is proposed that has possible impact on you, in their opinion, they'll send you this questionnaire, right? That says, here's the legislation. How will this affect you? What are the financial? Because in Missouri, every piece of legislation has to have what they call a fiscal impact report. And they have to look at this and say, how much financially, how will this affect state government and local government? Okay, so they're sending these out to you to see, to get a response on, if this passes, do you have any idea what kind of an impact this would have on you fiscally? They're not mandatory that you respond to them. Okay, so don't feel like you've got to do that. You will get flooded with these things. Okay, but you're not required to respond. If there's something particularly bothersome, you might want to respond to it saying, this is going to cost us, $5,000 a month if this passes. That's what they're looking for. Okay. So you can pick and choose if you want to respond and which ones you want to respond to. Okay.
Okay.
I know.
Is anyone else doing that?
There's several people that have gotten signed up for that.
Yeah.
Okay. For example, there's a piece of legislation that doesn't affect you guys. This affects private, like Missouri American type companies, but there's a piece of legislation that says that requires that they cannot collect past due accounts if they were required, if they were part of the no cutoff restrictions. Well, that's going to cost them tons of money. That'll be easy to tell you how much that bill's going to cost you, right? Now, it doesn't affect you guys because you're not regulated by PSC, but if it's something like that, I would respond to that, but otherwise you don't have to. Yeah, Kendra says you get flooded with emails. So, I would pick and choose, or if you don't want to mess with them, don't mess with them, right? It's just kind of a survey. They send it, you're not required to. So what else? Who has board members that attend training or conferences? Kathy wants to know. There's some of them that come to every conference. I know, like Boone 9, Roger, he has a group that comes. Boone 1 has a group that comes every month, about at least to one conference a year. So there's a few that do. It's hard to get your board members to come to training. I get that. And I don't know what you do because it's not required unless they want to get paid. And then you got to send them, then they have to come. Not municipalities, this is water districts. Ruth says 2 out of 5 have attended the training so far. That's pretty good. Okay. It says, if you take the online training, what do you need to do to be sure that you get the credit hours if they are approved for credit hours through DNR? That's done. We do that. Kathy, that's all set up in Zoom. You don't have to worry about that. if it's a DNR approved course, and I haven't done any of those, but we've done a ton of those, and Tom and Andy have that all worked out. So as an operator, if it's a DNR approved course for credit hours, it's kind of automatic. There's certain things when you register on Zoom, I think they ask for your certificate number, and then Zoom records whether you attended or not. So it's all almost seamless once you put all your information in. Okay. So you can get credit hours for online training if you're an operator, if the class has been approved for DNR credit hours. Okay. Let's see what else. So yeah, we're going to do a DNR training next week, 2 days, half days of training virtually online. So if you need some operator certification credit hours, that's one way to do it. You sign up. Okay. Okay. Let's see. We're getting credit for our Zoom attendance to be put on Twitter. Yes, you are. You probably need to keep track. I don't keep track. I mean, I can go back in the records, but you just need to put down attended, because they're all 1 hour. Okay, attended Zoom meetings on this and this and this a date. And if I question it, I can go back in the Zoom records and check it, but I probably will take your word for it. So yes, you're getting COP credit for this. Okay. Oh, so Kathy says her board refuses to go to training because they want to claim ignorance of the law. Ignorance is not an excuse, right? So they can still get in trouble. Just because they didn't know doesn't mean they can't get fined. The district can't get fined. So, okay, you guys, it's 2 minutes after. Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss?
Liz, I do have a question.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's short, and if not, we can handle it later. But if somebody wants to come into your district and they don't want to extend the main to get to them, to provide them with water, can they have another source of water, like a tank that they haul water and pump out of into their home, or
yes,
whatever they want?
Probably in the county, unless the county has an ordinance that forbids them to drill a well or have another source, which most counties don't. So yes, they probably can.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. You can't, you as a district don't have the authority to regulate that. So.
Yeah. I wasn't saying either way because I didn't know. So I was going to be doing some research here.
Yeah. Now that's not true on the wastewater side. On the wastewater side, if they're, I think it's within 300 foot of a public sewer line, they have to connect. That is state regulation or state law, but that doesn't apply on the water side. Okay. So.
Because they're being told that if they did do a alternative water source, not a well, but like it wasn't even a cistern, it was like a tank above ground to put his water in. He was told by a municipality that we could sue him for that, and I wasn't sure how we could do that. But
no, you can't. Now, a lot of municipalities by ordinance do not allow alternate water supply. You can't drill a well in city limits, and you can't do that kind of thing because it's a public health issue within the municipality. Okay. But it's different for water districts. You can't.
So this could be a scenario where it can fall within that gap, because it's within the city limits, but it's in our district.
Well, if it depends, then they would fall under the city ordinances. Yeah. If the city ordinance, you can't sue them, but right. If the city ordinance has an ordinance that says you can't have alternative water supplies, you must be on a public water supply, then it's the city's issue. It's not your issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Anybody got anything else? Good question. Okay, we're over time, so if you got to go, that's fine. I'm glad you joined us. This was a good first session for the first month of the year. But if nobody else has anything, we'll call it a day. So that means you can go home, everybody. So, okay. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us. Appreciated it. Enjoyed having you. We'll see you next